Welcome to the deep dive. We all try to do our bit with the recycling bin, right? Filling it up each week.
Mhm.
But today, we're taking a closer look at what really happens with all that plastic. We're digging into an analysis called Lie-Cycling of Plastics.
Right.
And our mission really is to get past these sort of feel-good headlines. We want to understand the reality of recycling, where plastic actually originates, and what it all means for the environment.
Exactly. Because there's this common perception, that recycling is solving the plastic problem.
Uh-huh.
But, well, this analysis really offers a different perspective. Quite an eye-opener.
Okay, let's kick things off with a statistic that, honestly, it kind of floored me. The analysis says only about 9%, just 9, of all plastic ever made has been successfully recycled.
9%. It's
Mhm.
stark, isn't it?
It really makes you pause. I mean, that number is so low, it highlights a massive challenge in just dealing with the stuff we produce, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Mm.
It shows that despite, all the effort and infrastructure, recycling's actual impact on that huge mountain of plastic waste is, well, surprisingly limited.
Which brings us to the source. Where's all this plastic coming from? It's almost entirely fossil fuels, right? Basically oil and gas.
That's correct. Pretty much all of it. The analysis explains it.
Yeah.
You start with things like natural gas liquids, NGLs, and naphtha from crude oil.
Okay.
Then through processes like fractionation, they separate out components like ethane and propane.
Right.
And then using something called steam cracking, those are converted into the basic building blocks, ethylene, propylene. Those are the monomers for plastics.
So the very same sources are fuel. And making plastic is, I gather, a pretty big part of that industry now.
Oh, definitely, and growing.
Yeah.
Currently, petrochemicals, that includes plastics, use about 14% of global oil demand and maybe 8% of gas demand.
Mm.
But the projections are where it gets really striking. The International Energy Agency, the IEA, they think this could jump to around 50%, half of oil demand, and almost 60% of gas demand by 2050.
Wow, 50%. That's huge. And there was another warning, too.
Yes, the OECD. They warned that if we don't take, urgent action, plastic production could actually triple by 2060, up to 1.2 billion tons a year.
Triple production. Okay, so if we're only managing to recycle 9% now, with production potentially skyrocketing,
Huh?
it really shines a light on why recycling is so difficult, doesn't it?
It really does. It's not simple. A key issue is cost. Making new virgin plastic from fossil fuels is often just cheaper.
Cheaper than recycling? Really?
Often, yes. Plus, recycling itself uses a lot of energy. It's expensive. Contamination is a huge problem. One wrong item in the bin can ruin a whole batch. And then there's the sheer variety of plastics. So many different chemical makeups. Many just aren't designed to be recycled with current tech.
So where does most of it end up then, if not recycled?
Well, the vast majority ends up in landfills.
Hmm.
Or worse, leaking into the environment, especially our oceans. Or it gets incinerated, burned.
Which has its own problems, like air pollution. And this leads to microplastics too, right? That seems to be everywhere now.
Exactly. Incineration isn't a clean solution, and the plastic that ends up in landfills or oceans breaks down, eventually, into tiny microplastic particles.
And these have real impacts. I saw a mention of photosynthesis.
Yes, that was quite alarming. A PNAS study highlighted in the analysis found these microplastics can actually inhibit photosynthesis in various plants and algae
How much?
by potentially 7 to 12%, which might sound small, but scale it up.
Uh-huh.
They estimate that could mean annual losses of hundreds of millions of tons in crops and millions of tons in seafood production globally. It's like throwing grit into the basic machinery of ecosystems.
That's quite a sobering thought. It feels like the focus on us, the consumers, sorting our recycling might be, well, missing the bigger picture. This brings us to that term, lie cycling. What's the core idea there?
The core idea of Lie-Cycling is sort of that the heavy emphasis on individual responsibility for recycling, it can mask the need for bigger systemic change.
SO.
Well, by promoting recycling as the solution, it can let producers and governments off the hook a bit. It puts the onus on us to manage the waste rather than tackling the source, the massive overproduction of plastic in the first place.
So it's presented as a neat fix, but it distracts from the production problem.
Kind of, yeah. A sort of techno-fix narrative that makes us feel we're doing enough without actually needing to, produce less plastic overall.
Okay, so if just trying harder to recycle isn't the full answer, what does the analysis suggest is the way forward? What are the proposed solutions?
It points towards a few key areas, really. Fundamentally, reducing the amount of new plastic being produced is number one.
Right, turn off the tap.
Exactly. Then, promoting genuinely biodegradable or compostable alternatives where appropriate. Also, much stricter government regulations on manufacturing and product design. Investing in better, truly sustainable waste management infrastructure, not just basic recycling. And, crucially, raising public awareness about the limitations of recycling while encouraging more sustainable ways of consuming things. Less throwaway culture.
So the big takeaway here seems to be recycling plays a part, sure, but it's a much, much smaller part than maybe we've been led to believe.
I think that's a fair summary, yes.
The real challenge is the sheer scale of production and its environmental impact, which needs these broader, more systemic solutions.
Precisely. It's a